Controversial boxer Imane Khalif has won gold at the Paris Olympics.
This might just be one of the most controversial Olympic gold medals of all time, and people on both sides of this debate are getting this story wrong. I'm Brad Polumbo, and we're going to break it all down in today's episode of Brad vs. Everyone, my daily podcast where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet and across our politics from a center-right, independent perspective. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and sticking around, and regardless, do remember to hit that like button as we go, and do comment with your thoughts. I pick a few comments in every episode to respond to, and I do read the comments section. Now up first, we've got to talk about the controversy at the Olympics involving the Algerian boxer Imane Khalif, who just won a gold medal in women's boxing. However, the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, is coming under huge scrutiny for allowing Khalif to participate because many have alleged that Khalif is biologically male. Let's turn to some news coverage from Sky News Australia to get caught up.
Controversial boxer Imane Khalif has won gold at the Paris Olympics. Matt Cunningham is live at Roland Garros. Matt, hello to you. What's the reaction been?
Well, I'm not sure if you can hear it in the background, but the crowd is absolutely roaring inside here at Centre Court at Roland Garros Stadium. 15,000 fans have packed that stadium tonight to watch Imane Khalif. Most of the fans there are Algerian supporters, and they have been backing her in 100% of the way. They were cheering Imane, Imane, Imane as she walked out for her bout with Liu Yang, and it wasn't even close, Janie. The Algerian absolutely destroyed her opponent during this gold medal bout. Of course, Imane Khalif has been a controversial figure at these games after her Italian opponent, Angela Carini, withdrew from their round of 16 bout after just 46 seconds, saying she'd never been punched so hard and that she feared for her life. It's also been revealed that Khalif was disqualified from last year's World Championships by the International Boxing Association, which said that she had failed a gender eligibility test. That's created a global storm about whether she should be fighting here at the Paris Games. That's going to continue now that she's won the gold medal, but there is no doubt that the Algerians who are here tonight were 100% in her corner.
Now, lots of people on both sides have gotten this story wrong, but I wanted to make sure I presented you guys with the full, nuanced truth. So, joining me to discuss this complicated issue is the PhD evolutionary biologist Colin Wright, who's the author of the amazing Substack, Reality's Last Stand. So, Colin, help us understand this once and for all. Does Imane Khalif have a biological advantage that makes it unfair for her to be in a women's boxing competition?
Absolutely, Imane does. This is rooted in the fact that Khalif is biologically male, and we know this because the International Boxing Association has conducted 2 DNA tests, the precise results of which they're not allowed to release for privacy reasons. These are like a private medical test. There's no reason to doubt the honesty of their claims. These were done in the Court of Arbitration and Science approved in sports labs. And their policy for the IBA of what qualifies as a woman is literally in their rules, somebody with an XX chromosome profile. So they've literally told us to sort of read between the lines. This is what they just said in a press conference, because if their policy is you need to be XX in order to be in the female category, and DNA tests show that these people were not XX, that means that they're XY. We clearly see that they appear have very masculine features, so they appear to be responding to testosterone. The presence of XY chromosomes is going to mean that you have testes that are going to develop, and those testes come online during puberty. And this is what gives us a male advantage: the androgenizing using testosterone during puberty that makes men and women, and it gives men, makes them bigger, faster, and stronger, which is the reason that we have separate male and female sports to begin with.
Yeah, but so a lot of people are not trusting the IBA, and I've heard allegations that it's tied to Russia, that it's a deeply corrupt institution. So they're saying we don't actually know whether Imane Khalif is genetically male or not, because the source for that derives from information from the IBA, which they don't trust. Do you find that compelling at all, or are you pretty solid in what the IBA is offering up here?
I don't find it compelling, mainly because this isn't a claim that is difficult to prove otherwise. This is a claim. If you're going to be this Russian organization and you're just these mustache twirling Russians in the Kremlin trying to fake data, if you're going to fake something, faking a DNA test, something that can be debunked quickly, cheaply, definitively in an instant, this is just opening up the IBA to just having their reputation completely thrashed. This is something that they could just debunk immediately, and what you would expect someone to do if you're being targeted by this Russian disinformation campaign. Naturally, they would just go up and say, oh, here's a cheek swab test. I did it this afternoon. Here's the results, published to make them public. And then the Russians would just go away and they would be forever shamed for trying to pull this type of stunt off. But what we've seen is just really the opposite. We've seen basically what you would expect if those results, those DNA results, were accurate, and they were trying to just bury these tests. They refused to appeal the process, and the IBA would have covered the majority of those costs during the appeal. Their respective countries, Algeria and Taiwan, they've issued letters saying that they're forbidding these results to be made public. Like, this isn't the type of thing you would expect if this was just a disinformation campaign, and that Khalif and Yu Ting actually had XX chromosomes that they could demonstrate very easily.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody was lying about me, some big organization, and I could disprove it with a quick, not invasive test, I would just do that and release it publicly.
Yeah. I'll just quickly add too that people seem to default to the IOC. They're just saying that, well, the IOC, the IBA is corrupt, but the IOC is kind of viewed as this paragon of ethics and everything. But people who've been following this issue of sex testing in sports knows the IOC is about as corrupt and captured as they come. They had the opportunity to, do these types of tests for Caster Semenya back in the day, but they instead tried to bury those results of Caster's DNA tests using the same rhetoric of, this is just a woman with naturally high testosterone. That turned out to be completely false. The IOC is just known for their incompetence here. And they did a press conference with the president of the IOC who said that there just isn't a scientifically valid way to test whether someone is a male or female, which is totally false. And I know the people who are involved in creating those policies, and he won't take their calls or emails. So the IOC is by no means a default, non-corrupt, good organization. So corruption all the way around here. So, yeah.
So the discourse, this will not surprise you to learn, the discourse about Imane Khalif and this controversy on TikTok has been nothing short of unhinged. And the argument seems to be simultaneously that Imane Khalif is a woman, born a woman, is a genetic female, nothing to see here, but also that if there is an advantage, that's totally fine and normal because something Michael Phelps. I would like you to take a listen to this interesting video, and then I want to get your thoughts.
In terms of Imane Khalif having a biological advantage, let's discuss Michael Phelps. Phelps has double jointed elbows and knees, a hyperextended thorax, 50% less lactic acid than the average competitor. And yet, no one ever said he had a biological advantage.
So, is this argument that there are biological differences within men and within women, does this somehow negate the need to have sex segregated sports, or mean that it's perfectly fair for people who are genetically or biologically male to compete in women's sports? Because I've heard this talking point over and over and over again.
It's completely insane. I mean, we have this idea. Well, so no one is saying that sports isn't trying to look for exceptional individuals who have biological advantages. LeBron James is a perfect example. Just a genetic freak, athleticism out of control, amazingly talented, high basketball IQ. These are things that, like, a lot of these things can't just be taught to people. So we love seeing these superstars. That's why we have the All-Star game. That's why we have the Olympics, because we see these exceptional athletes who are just, they have a biological advantage and a training advantage over all the athletes that didn't make it to the Olympics. So the point isn't that we're not looking for biological advantages or we don't care about certain advantages over other. It's really just sort of this all else being equal. Are there some categories of individuals that have this as a group an advantage that other people as a group do not have? So we see this in boxing, for instance. We could just have no weight classes whatsoever in boxing and just saying, like, whoever is able to just knock whoever out, that's all there should be. But we recognize we have this value that we say, well, we also want to control for weight, because weight seems to be this this variable that is just completely dominating in boxing, when we want to have people who are of all different sort of body weights fight, because boxing is all about talent as well, and we want to see how training works and all of that stuff. So when it comes to male and female sports, what we're controlling for there isn't that normal biological advantage of individuals. It's an advantage of an entire class of people, that males, they go through male puberty that gives them all of the bigger, faster, stronger attributes that makes them more likely to beat women in sports. If we didn't have female sports, everyone just competed in the same league, you wouldn't see any women competing in any sports whatsoever, at least at elite levels, because once you get to those elite levels of sports, just the number of females you have there is non-existent, as you get, the 0.01 percentage of athletic ability. So if we value as a society that we want women to be able to play competitive sports, professional sports, be in the Olympics, because this is, it's good to be able to compete, then once we admit that we want to see women in these types of categories, be able to compete, we realize that we need to have a category that is a women's category to control for that male advantage. And then once you admit that, you need to have certain kind of exclusion criteria for that category that need to be enforced very strictly. Otherwise, you don't have a female category at all. So the Michael Phelpses of the world, they're doing well within their category, which we're perfectly happy to have biological advantages within categories. It's just, once you start crossing that categorical boundary, we wouldn't let heavyweights, identify as a featherweight and compete there, just because it's that's how they feel about themselves or something.
I do want to get some clarity from you, though, because when this story first came onto the scene, a lot of people spoke out about it, critics from the right in particular, in a way that's turned out to not be accurate. So Imane Khalif has some sort of disorder of sexual development or intersex condition, right? But this is not a transgender person, right? This is not a trans case as some initially presented it, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Imane does not appear to be trans, but has a difference or disorder of sexual development.
So I want to play for you a clip of former President Donald Trump speaking about this controversy and get your thoughts on what he had to say.
And I'd like to congratulate the young woman who transitioned from a man into a boxer. You saw she won the gold medal. How about the young beautiful Italian boxer? She got in there and she didn't know what was going on, and she was a very good boxer, against other women. She didn't count on this. And he's up here, boom, one little jab, whoa. She goes, nobody ever hit me that way. Then he goes, boom. And she said, okay, I had enough. It's crazy what they're doing. And this person won the gold medal. Did they win the gold medal today? What do you think of that, Tim? I don't think Tim likes it. Greg, no good, right? Now, how crazy is it? How crazy is it? For 4 more years, and she wants it. She wants men to play in women's sports.
So was that an accurate or helpful way to discuss this issue, framing it as a man who transitioned?
No. So Khalif and Yuting, they did not transition. They have most likely a difference of sexual development that had resulted in the presentation of female appearing genitalia at birth, which means even though they were quote unquote assigned female at birth, the fact that they have a DSD sort of obscures the fact that that was a misassignment, that it was an incorrect assignment, which leads to a lot of these individuals being raised as the sex that they're not in certain ways. They're socialized in this way. This is how they think about themselves. And then it's not until puberty that their internal testes come online and start producing those androgenizing effects in their bodies that give them the male advantage in sports. So the whole gender ideology lexicon is actually doing a lot of it's playing its part in the confusion here, because we'll hear people say that, Imane Khalif was born a woman. What they mean is sort of the assigned sex at birth thing, even though, as I mentioned, this was a misassignment. Or they'll say that Khalif is a cisgender woman. But again, if you look at what the sort of the terminology used in gender ideology, a cisgender woman is just someone who was assigned female at birth and who identifies as a woman later in life. Again, that obscures the fact that this was a misassignment at birth. This was the doctors incorrectly categorize this person's sex at birth. So this is not a trans issue, but it's still a male competing in female sports. So it requires the same sort of regulations that you would have to keep, people males who just are identifying as women out of sports.
Yeah, it just, to me, this story, I waited before I spoke out about it because I wasn't sure about the facts, and it feels like a lot of people just kind of jumped and pounced on it and tried to perfectly put it into a ongoing culture war, even though it actually is kind of nuanced and complicated. And I think most of the people talking about Imane Khalif did not know the what DSD meant or what intersex was or any of these things until 5 minutes ago, but have suddenly become experts. And I do think that the way Khalif has been treated is somewhat harsh and somewhat unfair. You have all these people acting as if this is the same thing as a dude who starts identifying as a chick and just hops in the boxing ring to beat up on women. Obviously, it's much more complicated than that. I imagine it would be incredibly traumatic to be born thinking you are a female, raised as a female, then have the other sex puberty hit you, find out you have some rare genetic abnormality, but you still have always felt your life like a woman. Like, I actually have a lot of compassion. I don't think this person should be allowed to compete in women's boxing. This person is a genetic male, and that is not fair and it is not safe. But I do have a lot of compassion because this is not a transgender case. This is a complicated biological difference. And so I don't think Imane Khalif is the great villain of this story either, in the way that she's been made out to be by some people, for sure.
Exactly. That's so important. There's no bit of sinister behavior on Khalif's part. I think all of the blame, literally all of it, belongs with the IOC for not specifying any inclusion or exclusion criteria for the women's category. This is something the IBA had. They had their policy of having XX chromosomes. This is something all of the other sports in the Olympics have had so far because they're governed by their international regulatory bodies. The IOC, once they removed the IBA from for using their policy, the IOC just didn't include any policy that would keep males out of female sports. They just looked at someone's passport. But again, because you can't really look at passports or even birth certificates here if you have a misclassification at birth. And so the IOC is responsible for letting this happen. And, the society is really mean and cruel, but you have to expect that's going to happen in these types of situations. And the IOC should have known this is going to happen. And they should have just done their best, not just to protect, the athletes, their female athletes who are getting inappropriately criticized, like Iana Mar, who's the rugby player who people were accusing of being a man, even though it wasn't the case. And people who have DSDs who shouldn't be competing at that level in the Olympics anyway, because, well, one, it's unfair, and two, it's going to just open them up to this insane amount of public scrutiny, ire, contempt, and this is the insane amount of vitriol that we're seeing right now. So the IOC, I think, is to blame for all of this, for sure.
All right, Colin Wright, thank you so much. Everybody, I will link to Colin's great Substack, Reality's Last Stand, in the description. Go and check it out. Colin, thanks again.
Hey, thanks, Brad.
All right, up next, Kamala Harris is actually agreeing with Donald Trump on something, but I kind of think they're both wrong, honestly. Here's Kamala Harris at a recent campaign rally in Las Vegas.
And it is my promise to everyone here, when I am president, we will continue our fight for working families of America. Including to raise the minimum wage and eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
So Kamala is getting roasted for a lack of originality, and rightfully so. Donald Trump, over a month ago, came out with this exact same policy idea. No taxes on tips, although it actually originates decades back with Ron Paul. But anyway, Trump made a big show of announcing this proposal and having it be something he's making central to his campaign, likely in an attempt to appeal to potential voters who work in the hospitality industry and would love to not have to pay any taxes on their tips, to essentially work tax-free or at least exempt from some major taxes. And rather than run against Trump on this, Kamala's simply saying, anything you can do, I can do as well, I guess, and essentially Control C, Control Ving his policy plan on this issue and just making it her own. Now, there is some bizarre hypocrisy and incoherence here from Kamala's side that's not necessarily present with Donald Trump, because the Biden-Harris administration specifically increased IRS funding, and the IRS, under its leadership, pushed a new program specifically meant to increase monitoring and compliance with the tax reporting of tips of people in the hospitality industry. So their actual governing record has been to crack down on unreported tips and encourage the IRS to do more to make sure people are paying taxes on tips. But now she's saying she wants to do away with taxes on tips altogether. The math isn't really mathing there, babe. But whether it's Kamala saying it or Trump saying it, I actually think while this idea sounds great at first glance, it doesn't make much sense and it's not actually fair. Trust me, I want working people in this country to pay less in taxes. I really do. And I have sympathy for people who aren't making that much money but still have to give a good chunk of it to Uncle Sam. But despite the way that both Kamala and Trump are framing this policy wouldn't actually help your very low-earning wait staff who maybe work at a Denny's or something, because they already don't really pay federal taxes on net. According to the Tax Policy Center, half of wait staff in the U.S. make $32,000 or less annually. A single worker making $32,000 would owe roughly $1,900 in federal income tax. But that's only if they could not claim any benefits such as the child tax credit or the earned income tax credit. Most parents making $32,000 or less who receive those credits already pay no federal income tax. So the vast majority, although not all, of the waiters and waitresses who are truly low income, who are hoping they would be helped by this, already get whatever income tax they pay back in the form of credits or a refund. On net, they do not pay federal income tax. So how this would actually help them is totally unclear to me. It would definitely help, however, waiters at higher end restaurants who are getting huge tips and earn a pretty good living. Again, according to the Tax Policy Center, the situation for waitstaff at high-end restaurants is another story. A 20% tip on a $200 meal is vastly different than one for the $9.95 special at Mom's Diner. Indeed, the Labor Department estimates that the highest earning 10% of waitstaff make $60,000 or more annually. They make far more in tips than in cash wages and could benefit significantly from Trump's plan. Now, even those people are hardly rich, but I don't know that it's necessarily fair to give them a special tax break that nobody else gets. There's a fundamental fairness issue here. Why should one person earning $50,000 a year as a waiter versus another person earning $50,000 a year as a construction worker? Why should the waiter pay no income tax at all, but the construction worker have to fork thousands of dollars over to Uncle Sam? That just seems fundamentally unfair to me. Now, some people insist that, well, tips are actually just gifts, and gifts aren't taxable up to a certain amount. But that's obviously not really true, because gifts already aren't taxable, yet tips are, so clearly the law is currently defining them differently. And I wouldn't really say that a tip is a gift anyway, because you are giving it in exchange for a service, and while it's not mandatory, it is heavily socially encouraged and expected. I mean, by this logic, if I pay myself a bonus every year through my company, is that a gift? Should that be tax-free? Because I can tell you, it's certainly not right now. So while I definitely want tax cuts for working class people in America in general, I would rather use this kind of money, if we're going to be reducing revenues, to give some sort of flat or across-the-board reduction to the payroll tax or another tax that hurts working people and eats away at their paychecks for everyone across the board. I don't like the idea of giving one specific type or one group of workers zero taxation and everyone else has to just pay the same full amount. Doing this could also potentially warp economic outcomes in unexpected ways. So one thing that could happen is that people would start tipping less, which would then kind of defeat the entire point. Right. Another thing that could easily happen is that you'd have a real hard time getting anybody to want to work hourly jobs or low salary jobs because everyone would want to work at a tipped job. So all sorts of jobs that are looking for people to work but aren't tipped traditionally would either have trouble finding people or they'd have to switch to a tip model. You constantly hear people complaining these days about how often they're asked to tip. Every screen is tip, 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 even in areas that aren't traditionally, tipped fields. It's not a restaurant. It's not somebody earning $2 an hour and then getting tips. It's a $15 an hour Starbucks worker, but they're flipping over the screen and asking me to tip 20%. Well, I can tell you one thing for certain. If this Kamala Trump policy plan were enacted, you could expect a huge increase in being asked to tip people because everyone would switch to a tip model as much as possible to avoid and reduce taxes. And that would be understandable, but I think it would actually end up frustrating a lot of people. And it puts more of the labor costs onto consumers and less on employers. So people are really annoyed these days about constantly being asked to tip and the excessive amount of tipping culture, but this would almost certainly make that much, much worse. There's also just the raw numbers of it. According to the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, this would cost anywhere from $150 to $250 billion over 10 years in reduced revenue. That's money that would either have to be directly taxed from other people to make up for it, or it would be added to the national debt, which would then mean more taxes to cover the interest payments and lower economic growth and many other consequences. Or they could print the money to pay for it, in which case we would all get to pay via inflation. There really is no such thing in economics as a free lunch. You can't just give one group a total tax exemption and have no costs or consequences for anyone else. It's not that I'm just spiteful and want struggling waiters and waitresses to have to pay more in taxes, not at all. It's that I don't want to give a special exemption to one group at everyone else's expense, especially when that's being pretty blatantly motivated by an attempt to just bribe people to vote for you. This whole no tax on tips thing might turn out to be good politics for Trump or for Kamala, but it's not actually good policy and isn't a very sound idea on a fundamental level. That's just my take. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you disagree with me. I do want to hear from you. And now it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet, and do hit that like button to reward my suffering through the depths of stupidity on this horrific, horrific app. Today, we're going to watch an incredibly disturbing video from a trans activist known as Lily Tino, who in this video, for audio listeners, is dressed up as Ms. Rachel, the popular entertainer for literal toddlers and infants that many parents use to teach their kids language development and occupy their attention. Well, this trans activist, Lily Tino, dressed up like Ms. Rachel to deliver this interesting message to the internet and, I guess, to kids directly.
Hey friends! Today we're talking about something super cool called pronouns. Pronouns are little words that help us talk about each other. We all have pronouns. Some people use he and him, like this bear. He's so cuddly. Some people use she and her, like this cat. She's so playful. Some people use they and them. Oh, like this frog. They like to hop. Can you say he's so cuddly? Good. Can you say she's so playful? Good. Can you say they like to hop? Good job. And it's important to ask people what their pronouns are because you can't always tell by what they look like. Here's how you do it. Hi, my name is Lily. My pronouns are she and her. What about you? Then the other person can tell you their name and pronouns. Using the right pronouns makes everyone feel happy and included. It shows that you care about them. Plus, it's an easy way to be a good friend.
Ugh. I just hate this so much. Now, you may recognize this person if you're a regular watcher of my channel because we have previously covered this individual doing disturbing things, like when this person went to Disney and in front of lots of children in the background described their genital surgery using food as props in a slightly nauseating way in full voice that many children in the background could hear and just in a very unusual setting to discuss such a thing. It was very bizarre and it was roundly condemned across the internet, even on TikTok. That's the crazy thing. It's this woke hellscape of an app, but even there, the comment sections of this person's video are almost exclusively negative. People saying, this is crazy, this is creepy, please stop, what are you doing, Lily? Even people who are pro-trans and are accepting of trans people find this content alarming and disturbing, and I completely understand why. There is something very creepy about a grown adult dressing up like Miss Rachel, a known figure that's targeted towards infants and toddlers to attempt to deliver in a child-accessible tone strange messages about gender identity and pronouns. There is simply no need to talk to infants or toddlers about pronouns and gender identity. You are just going to confuse them. They literally don't even understand much more basic concepts than that about themselves or about life, so you do not need to go confusing them with concepts including frankly nonsensical concepts like non-binary identity that even adults struggle to understand because they're not actually coherent or logical. You don't need to go confusing literal toddlers and infants with this kind of nonsense. And it's so incredibly frustrating for me as a sane member of the LGBT category. It's not really a community, but as a gay person, because for so long, people in our category were lied about and falsely claimed that we were going after the children or that we posed some particular threat to minors, which is not statistically true. And now you have prominent voices and faces of this community going out and actively targeting minors with inappropriate content. That is not just gross in its own right, like it'd be wrong for anyone to do that, but it's also disgusting because you are playing into the worst stereotypes, you are confirming people's prejudices against the LGBT community, and you are giving all of us, but especially all transgender people, most of whom I think even would admit this is crazy, giving them and us more broadly, but especially trans people, a really terrible name. I mean, I cannot imagine a better way to get normal, everyday Americans who are fine with gay marriage and don't care if people are gay and even maybe don't really care if some adults are trans, a better way to get them to turn against the LGBT community and become hostile to us and our rights and our acceptance again than this kind of shit. And that's what bothers me about it in particular, because it is obviously what we've come to call rage bait. This is content that is deliberately offensive and provocative. It is done in the most antagonistic way imaginable. It is meant to upset people because then, and look, I'm playing into this by talking about it on this show, and I do acknowledge that. But then people share the content, this person's profile grows, they comment angrily, which boosts the video in the algorithm and they get more views. They share it with other people to show them how disgusting it is, and that boosts it in the algorithm and it gets more views. And you will notice these videos are always just a little bit over 1 minute. They're 1 minute and 5 seconds or something like that. And that's because a minute is the threshold beyond which your video becomes monetized on TikTok. So this individual is earning hundreds to potentially thousands of dollars per video. Now, I respect the hustle. I'm not going to shade a content creator who monetizes their content. I monetize my content. That's fine. But when you are deliberately doing something destructive to your own community and only meant to inflame passions and upset people just so you get more views and more money, that is disgusting and unethical. You are quite literally sabotaging the LGBT community to line your own pockets. I honestly don't know how this person sleeps at night, but I can say I hope they're just kept far away from everyone's kids. You let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you find this as, frankly, demonic as I did? I do want to hear from you. And I'm already running over for today, so I'm going to have to skip your comments, but I'll do some more on tomorrow's show. So that is it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. And with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.